The war had ended, or so the alien coalition believed. Their fleets hung above Earth's atmosphere like a cruel constellation, and the commanders declared the planet subdued. Only the cleanup remained, small, surgical strike teams to hunt down the remnants of human resistance. The aliens laughed as they descended, calling it mopping duty. To them, Earth's so-called backup forces were nothing more than desperate survivors with outdated rifles and broken morale. The humans had lost their cities, their satellites, and most of their armies. What could possibly be left? Sergeant Kareth of the Varn Dominion led one such strike team through the frozen wastelands of northern Canada, his exosuit crackling in the cold. Around him, his squad trudged noisily through snow that swallowed their steps. The air was thin, metallic, and sharp. He sneered behind his helmet. These apes couldn't handle orbital fire. Now they think snow will save them. His second-in-command, a nervous recruit from the Avil line, chuckled through the comms. If they're hiding here, they'll freeze before we find them. The humans, though, were not entirely gone. In a scattered network of bunkers and ice caves, survivors clung to hope. Commander Sarah Holt, one of the last remaining officers of Earth's Defense Command, monitored alien movements through static-laden sensors. Her hair was unkempt, her eyes hollow from exhaustion, but she refused to surrender. "They think we're beaten," she whispered to her aide, Lieutenant Parker. "Let them. The fewer that know who's still fighting, the better." She paused, listening to the intermittent crackle of radio signals, faint and erratic. One of them repeated the same encrypted code again and again, a heartbeat in the silence. Parker frowned. That signal's coming from the northern ridge. Could be a trap. Holt didn't answer immediately. She stared at the coordinates, remembering rumors whispered through what remained of the resistance networks. Stories about a lone operative who moved unseen across battlefields that should have been lost. No one had proof, only aftermaths, destroyed alien patrols, shredded armor, and the eerie absence of any surviving witnesses. Could be a trap, she murmured, or it could be him. Far away, the alien strike team reached the ridge. Visibility dropped to nearly nothing as the blizzard thickened. The sky turned gray, snow spiraling down in relentless waves. Kareth activated his visor's thermal sensors, scanning the landscape. Nothing moved except the wind. His troops spread out, laughing, their confidence unwavering. They began broadcasting jokes across the comm channels about Earth's ghost army. One even pantomimed human fear, clutching at his chest and pretending to die dramatically. The laughter echoed until it was swallowed by the storm. Then something changed. A faint static whisper bled into their headsets. It wasn't interference. It was a voice, calm, steady, human. "You shouldn't have come here." Kareth froze. "Identify yourself," he barked, spinning in place. No response, just that same slow, deliberate breath through the comms. One of his soldiers turned toward a flicker of movement and raised his weapon, but before he could fire, his visor blinked red, then black. He collapsed silently, a neat hole drilled through his helmet. The squad scattered, shouting in panic. "Contact! Contact!" The blizzard grew louder, like the world itself roaring. Shapes shifted in the storm, shadows that weren't shadows. Another alien fell, then another, each strike surgical, precise, impossible to track. Kareth shouted orders, but every command dissolved into static. The voice returned, low and final. "You called us broken. You called us weak. Remember that when you hear my footsteps." Parker's console at the bunker lit up with a sudden transmission. Holt leaned closer as distorted alien screams filled the airwaves. Then, amid the chaos, a human signal broke through, carrying a single word. A call sign. "Reaper." Holt exhaled, not in relief, but in awe. Somewhere out there, in the endless white, Earth was still fighting back, and death had chosen side. The storm muffled every sound except the crunch of Reaper's boots as he descended from the ridge where the alien squad had vanished minutes earlier. The blizzard bent around him as if afraid to touch him, scattering across the folds of his tattered cloak. Beneath the hood, his skull-like mask hid the furrow of concentration etched across his real face. He had learned long ago that silence served him better than intimidation, yet he could not deny the effect the mask had on the enemy. Terror was a tool, and he wielded it with precision. His rifle hung against his chest, still warm from the last volley, but he moved without triumph. The fallen squad had been sloppy, arrogant, and predictable. More would come, stronger ones. He needed to stay ahead of them. He paused beside a shallow drift and knelt, brushing snow aside to reveal a cracked alien visor. The impact mark was small, centered, deliberate. Good. No wasted motion. But the fight had been too easy, and ease bred danger. The coalition would not ignore this loss. He lifted his head, scanning the horizon through the storm's thickening veil. The mountains groaned as the wind clawed at them, carrying faint echoes, tree limbs snapping, ice shifting, tiny sounds he had trained himself to distinguish from footsteps or engines. Nothing yet, but the quiet had a tension that unsettled him. He slid the visor fragment into a pouch. Evidence mattered. Patterns mattered. Panic among the invaders would spread fastest if they understood how little they understood. Far to the south, Holt's voice crackled faintly in his earpiece. "Reaper, do you copy?" He tapped the transmitter but didn't speak. Protocol demanded silence unless absolutely necessary. Holt understood. Her sigh carried through before she regrouped. "Your signal confirms you're alive." "Good. We intercepted alien chatter. They're moving reinforcements toward your coordinates. Don't linger." He allowed himself a quiet exhale. Holt always tried to sound composed, but he could hear the fatigue behind her words. Every day she held the resistance together was a victory, but victories were brittle things. He needed to keep pressure on the aliens, not only to thin their numbers, but to protect the survivors who still believed Earth wasn't finished. He rose and continued forward, following a path no one else could read, a trail of subtle terrain cues, memory, and instinct. As he advanced, he spotted the faint imprint of alien boots half buried in new snow. Not fresh, but not old. Likely scouts, perhaps searching for the missing squad. He crouched, analyzing the spacing and depth. The tracks were uneven, indicating haste. Good. Fear was already creeping into their movements. Fear slowed decision-making, and slow enemies died quickly. He traced the path to a narrow ravine, its entrance framed by jagged ice. The storm funneled through it, creating a haunting howl. Perfect acoustics for an ambush, but too obvious. The coalition might expect an attack there. Instead, he skirted the ravine's upper ridge, careful with each step, keeping low against the wind-carved rock. Halfway across the ridge, he froze. Below, two alien soldiers trudged through the ravine, scanning their surroundings with jittery motions. Their helmets flickered with interference, likely from damage inflicted by the storm or by Reaper himself during earlier engagements. They spoke to each other in clipped, strained tones. Not confident, not mocking, already frightened. Reaper watched them for several breaths, assessing distance, angles, and timing. He could eliminate them quickly, but the smarter move was patience. Let them report back. Let them spread their unease. Information could wound more deeply than bullets. After another moment, he retreated quietly, leaving no trace of his presence except the cold gaze through which he measured the world. The storm swallowed him again, and he vanished into its shifting white. The aliens below never knew how close death had come. The news of the vanished strike team spread through the alien coalition with a speed born of fear rather than efficiency. Official reports described environmental complications, but the soldiers who whispered in mess halls and maintenance bays called it something else entirely. They spoke of a phantom, a human warrior who hunted patrols with impossible precision. Their commanders dismissed the rumors as primitive superstition, yet the tension curling through every unit told another story. Reinforcements were dispatched to the northern territories, larger teams, heavily armed, in order to prove that Earth's resistance was nothing more than fading embers. Reaper moved ahead of them like a shadow, anticipating its source. He studied their deployments through intercepted signals, deciphering patterns beneath their bluster. The coalition relied on overwhelming force and rigid doctrine, tactics that worked well against organized armies, not a solitary hunter who lived in the spaces between rules. With each transmission he monitored, he built a map in his mind. Supply routes, fallback zones, communication blind spots. The aliens believed the storm was their enemy, but Reaper understood it as an ally. The storm concealed his footsteps, masked his heat signature, and distorted sound in ways he had learned to exploit with instinctive ease. He found the first reinforcement squad marching through a valley of fractured ice pillars, their lights cutting sharp lines through the gloom. They moved cautiously, but caution alone couldn't save them. Reaper waited until they reached the narrowest point before triggering the explosive heat embedded deep beneath the snow hours earlier. The blast rippled through the valley, shattering ice and sending a cascade of shards crashing down. The aliens scrambled for cover, but their confusion was all the opening he needed. From a ridge above, he fired methodically, each shot calculated to break cohesion rather than annihilate them outright. He wanted survivors, terrified ones. Within minutes, the squad dissolved into chaos, retreating in disarray and broadcasting frantic warnings. Their transmissions reached Holt's bunker soon after. She listened carefully, brow furrowed as alien voices cracked under strain. Parker leaned beside her console, eyes wide. They're panicking. Reaper really shook them. Holt didn't smile, though she felt a flicker of pride. Panic is useful, she said, but panic isn't victory. We need them confused long enough for our people to regroup. She adjusted the frequency, searching for Reaper's signal, but as always, he remained silent. She wondered how he endured the solitude, days without companionship, without warmth, locked in a landscape that consumed hope as easily as snow-swallowed footprints. Yet he continued, relentless and certain in his purpose. Meanwhile, the coalition escalated its efforts. 2 additional units converged on the valley, determined to corner the elusive human. Reaper anticipated their strategy long before they arrived. He moved through the terrain with swift precision, weaving between ridgelines and ravines, forcing his pursuers to spread thin. He understood the psychology of hunters becoming hunted. Once pride fractured, desperation followed. In desperation, mistakes multiplied. One squad attempted to encircle him near a frozen lake whose surface was veined with cracks. Reaper stepped lightly across the ice, drawing them forward. When they reached the lake center, he hurled a shock charge and dove behind a boulder. The explosion reverberated beneath the ice, which splintered like fragile glass. Aliens plunged into the frigid depths, armor dragging them down before they could react. The survivors screamed for extraction, but the storm drowned their pleas. The final squad retreated before engaging, broadcasting their fear openly. Their message was simple, frantic, and repeated across multiple channels. The human is death. Do not follow him. Reaper listened to the fading signal, feeling neither triumph nor remorse. Fear was a weapon, but he bore the weight of its cost. Each fallen enemy pushed the coalition closer to collapse and pushed him further from the man he once had been. Still, he turned toward the next ridge. The storm awaited, and so did the war. The coalition's retreat from the northern valley was brief. Shame burned too hot for their commanders to allow continued hesitation, and soon the air trembled with the descent of a new unit, one unlike the others Reaper had faced. These soldiers moved with discipline, not bravado, their formation tighter and their scans more meticulous. Their armor bore markings reserved for elite operatives, the kind deployed only when humiliation threatened strategic credibility. Reaper watched them through the veil of snowfall, studying their posture, their gait, the harmony in their movements. These enemies would not break easily. They had come not merely to kill him, but to erase the myth his existence had created. He shifted along a cliffside and settled behind a jagged outcropping. The storm offered less cover now, its earlier fury easing into a steady drift that revealed more than it concealed. He adjusted his breathing, slowing it, grounding himself in the familiar rhythm of anticipation. He remembered his squad before the invasion, men and women whose laughter still echoed in the back of his mind. They had been skilled, disciplined, and brave, Yet all of them had fallen long before these elites ever touched Earth soil. That memory sharpened his resolve. He would not allow their sacrifice to dissolve into forgotten snow. Below, the elite unit advanced with synchronized sweeps, each soldier covering the blind spots of the next. Their leader, a tall figure with an obsidian faceplate, signaled silently for a halt. They crouched, scanning the terrain with coordinated efficiency. Reaper recognized the pattern immediately. They were reading the battlefield the same way he was. He smiled behind the mask, not with amusement, but respect. This would not be another rout. It would be a contest of wills. He moved from his vantage point, slipping between narrow crevices until he reached a perch overlooking a frozen expanse. The wind carried the distant hum of alien engines, suggesting a dropship waiting beyond the ridge. These elites expected to return victorious. He needed to break that expectation. With careful precision, he placed a charge beneath a slab of ice weakened by shifting temperatures. The device blinked softly, armed but dormant, awaiting his signal. Moments later, the elites entered the clearing. Their formation was perfect, every step measured. Reaper fired a single shot, not at a soldier, but at a distant rock face. The ricochet drew their attention instantly, and they fanned out, weapons raised. Their reaction confirmed his suspicion. They were prepared for ambushes, not misdirection. As they repositioned, he triggered the charge. The ice fractured with a thunderous crack. A sinkhole opened beneath the unit, swallowing half of them before they could react. Those who landed safely scrambled to aid their comrades, but Reaper was already moving, using the chaos to close the distance. He struck fast and decisively, relying on instincts honed through years of fighting enemies who underestimated humanity. These elites did not underestimate him, yet even they struggled against the fluidity of his assault. Their polished tactics clashed with his unorthodox adaptability. Their leader confronted him at the edge of the sinkhole, blades mounted to their forearms gleaming beneath the muted sky. The clash was brutal and intimate, each strike echoing through the frozen air. Pain flared up Reaper's arm as the blade grazed him, but he pushed through it, driving his opponent backward until momentum and terrain took over. The aliens stumbled, misjudged the fractured ice, and plunged into the chasm below. Silence settled, broken only by the wind. The remaining elites retreated, broadcasting frantic warnings to their command ship. Reaper listened as they named him with a fear that transcended language. They called him the human death shadow, the one who walked where armies fell. Far to the south, Holt received confirmation of the retreat. For the first time in weeks, her voice held quiet certainty as she spoke into the battered transmitter. Reaper, your path is clear. The resistance is ready. Come home. Reaper stood alone in the snow, battered but unbowed, watching the sky where alien ships withdrew into the clouds. The war was far from over, but for the first time, victory felt possible.